Hello and welcome to the first part of a set of tutorials where we are going to look at creating a space game using MakeCode Arcade. Now, just to give you a really quick run through about everything that's here. The first thing is this little gamepad on the left hand side. This is your controller and your view, your player. So whatever you create here will appear in this little black screen. This here is actually a joystick, which you can move around, as you can see. And if I move the arrow keys, I'm tapping the arrow keys now on my keyboard, you can see things are happening. And if I press the space key, for example, now that's the A button, and there's also a B button there. That there is a reset, and you do have a menu here to sort of increase and decrease the volume as you need, should you wish to need to. Okay. At the bottom here, you do have a few other controls. So if something does go terribly wrong with the game, you can hit the stop button, which will stop the emulation here. You can restart it. We're not probably going to use the debugging mode, so you probably won't need it. You can also bring up keyboard commands, which will show you essentially what it is you need. So you can see the B key there. The B key there is the enter key, or you can also press the X key in the keyboard. And there is an option for having a two-player mode as well, which probably we won't look at. Okay, so let's get started. Now, hopefully you've done the first lesson and completed the planning section, and there was a very real reason for that. I need you to make sure that you've planned a few things and you've got a few things ready. Now, what we are going to look at is we're going to use this on start block, and we are going to put a sprite on here. Now, if I click on the sprites here, and I get this first one here, set my sprite to, I'm going to click drag and drop that into the on start here. Now at this point I'm going to get you to rename this. Okay, so this is going to be called our player sprite. So can you see where it's got set my sprite to? I'm going to click on this drop down list here, and we're going to rename the variable, and we're going to call this player. And the reason I want it to be known as a player is because obviously this is what we have called it in the planning booklet. So all you've got to do is rename it. Obviously it says there player already exists, so we have to change it to the name. So if we call it player or main player, then click OK. Great, it likes that one there. Okay. Now what we also need to do now is draw our sprite. Okay, so I'm going to click on this option here, which is the sprite window, and as you can see now there's an editor which has appeared. Now this is where your planning comes into play. Now this is an example that I've used, so you can see my player example is here. So that's what I've designed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and make that in here. Now if I just go back to this very quickly, there was a reason why I gave you 16 blocks by 16 blocks. That is because this is actually 16 blocks by 16 blocks, and you can see there in the bottom left hand corner 16 by 16. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start I'm going to go with drawing this. Now you are limited by colors, as you can see you've got a few there to choose from. Don't worry if you've chosen colors which aren't on here or aren't exact. It's absolutely fine. Just do your best to make sure you've got something on there. Now, as you can see already, I've made a bit of a mistake, but I'll show you how to undo that now in a moment. So, my aircraft, I think it's an aircraft anyway, is starting to take shape. Now, I'm not going to do it the entire thing, but I'm just going to give you a rough idea of what it is you need to do, and hopefully then you can see what I've done. Right, okay, so I need now to do two things. I need to delete that here, and to do that I'm going to click the eraser tool and I'm going to click on it there. Okay, so that's the first thing, and as you can see mine's actually lopsided, so I'm going to have to remove that one and then go back to my pencil tool here, click, and then drag another option there. Don't worry too much if you think it's off over to one side. That's fine. You can move things around, but you won't need to. You can select things here. There's a selection tool, and if I use that I can move it. But bearing in mind, if I selected part of this as an example and moved it, look, it moved only that part that I've selected. So there's the selection tool. And don't forget that if you need to make any more edits, you can just click back on the draw tool here, and you can then start to, if I go back to the arrays here as an example, I can start then to erase certain things on there. Okay, now you can spend a little bit of time making your ship or whatever you've decided to go for, your choice entirely. Now you will notice before you actually go, mine is actually pointing up towards the sky. If you wanted yours pointing towards the left or the right, obviously you could just draw it then to the left or the right. Okay. Now once you are done with your ship and you are happy with the design that you've made and you think, yeah, I'm good to go with that, all you need to do is two things. You'll need to click the done on the bottom here, and then what you should find is, with a bit of luck, if I click on the recycle part here, my sprite now appears on the main screen. Now we won't move yet, that'll come in the next part, but you can kind of see there now what we've done. This is there, ready, set to go. So what I'm going to ask you to do is this. From the sprites menu, click on the set my sprite, drag it in, rename it. So rename the variable, click on the drop down, rename variable, and then double click on the sprite image. Draw your sprite, click on done, and get to this stage for me, please. If you want to try yours out, you may have to click on the reset button there, or the play button, depends if it's paused or not, just to see it work. Get that done for me now, please. Pause the video and play it once you've done. What we need to do is work out how to get this object to move. So thankfully it's quite easy. What we need to do is click on the controller option here, and what we are then going to look at is the move sprite with buttons here. So if I click and hold down and then drag it in, you can see now it says move my sprite with buttons. We need to change this my sprite to main player, otherwise there's nothing there called my sprite anymore. And what you'll notice now is when you click on the play, you will be able to move this joystick and you can see it's moving around. Now you'll notice mine's got a little white dot there. It's because I've made a little mistake there, so let me just erase that and then click done, and you can see now we have got this and it's able to move around. Now the only downside with that is it's fantastic, but the issue I've got is that I actually want this to be at the bottom here. Okay, so the way we do that is quite simple. If I go into sprites, what we're going to do is set the sprite there, and if I just drag that in, dump that there, we have to change the name to main player, which is fine. And what you'll see, 0, 0 is the top left hand corner. If I just play this now, you can see it's gone up there. So what I need to do is bring that down here. Now the way we do that is if you click into this number here, the X or Y, you can see I've got a plot. So if I just move this down here to about the sort of middle, like that, what it'll do is it will automatically plot it there. Now if you need to go back and edit that again, just click in it and you can then just go and move it a little bit more down to the bottom or over the left or the right, depending on obviously what you want to do. So the next part of this is adding a move player variable, and I also want you to then set the position of the player to be close to the bottom, please. Pause the video now and complete that next task. Okay, so the next thing that we need to look at is controlling, obviously the player we sorted, but the issue we do have is that the player can go off the screen, and if we go up or down you can see it can go off completely, and obviously that's not great. Okay, so what we kind of want to do is limit this player so that it can only go as far as the edges of the screen. Now there's a few ways we can do it. We can actually stop the player moving up and down. Right, if you wanted to do that in your game, then click on the plus here and you can see you've got velocity x and velocity y. If I change this value to 0 as an example on the x-axis, you can see now if I just try and move things around, I can move up and down, but I cannot move left to right, so the x-axis is blocked. Now obviously if you don't want to do that, you can leave it as 100, that's absolutely fine. But what I was talking about earlier is if we want to stop it going off the sides of the screen. So the way we do that is if we click on the sprites and then go down to this option here which says set my sprite to stay in screen, and we've got a toggle switch here. So if I click, drag and dump that in. Now don't forget we need to change this my sprite. We need to put that to main player, and I'm going to turn that to on by clicking on it. If I just wait for this to reset, and you can see it goes to the edge and it won't go anymore. And if I go up, it goes to the top and bottom of the screen and it won't go any more than that. Okay, so that's the next thing I'm going to ask you to add in is this option here. And like I said, if you want to stop your player moving left or right, you need to take out the variable there on the y-axis. If you want to stop it going up and down, you need to take the number out there on the x-axis. Please pause the video now and add those customizations in. What we are going to be doing is adding in an enemy. So far we've got our player, we've got movement, we've set its position on start, and we've told it it's going to stay within the screen area so it can't hide. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to add in our enemy. Now to do this we're going to use something called onGameUpdate. So if I just drag that in, onGameUpdate every, and you can see we've got a timer here. So we've got something as low as 100 milliseconds and as long as 5 seconds. And I'll show you the difference between those once we've actually made our sprite. Now hopefully you've made your design. If you remember in the planning booklet in the previous lesson, there was an option for 2 enemies. We're going to use one of those enemies now at the moment. So what we are going to look at doing is clicking this here, and we're going to set that one there. So we're going to say set my sprite. Now again we need to change this, so I'm going to call this enemy 1. So I'm going to click on the drop down, rename, and I'm going to call it enemy 1 and click OK. Great, it likes that. And we're going to then draw the sprite as well, right? So if I click on this, again this is the same editors we've used before, so you should be fairly used to it. So I'm going to draw my enemy out now, which is going to look probably terrible, but there you are. So it's going to come out like that. Okay, so if I'm just going to draw this up quickly. Now obviously you can take a little bit more time. I'm just trying to do this very quickly just to show you what you can do, and I'll put that in there. Oh, in fact that looks absolutely terrible. But there you are, you can kind of see what I'm doing. Now I am going back and forth and using as many tools as I can, just put like a bit of a face on this at the moment. Okay, great, lovely. So that's my enemy there. There's one other thing you need to do once you've changed this, is change it of kind and make it then an enemy here. Okay, so that the program will know that this is obviously an enemy and this is the player, right? So it knows there's a difference between them. Okay, so what I'm gonna then do is we need to set the position of this. Now with the player I've set a fixed position, so we can kind of do that as well, but really if I want this spawning, I don't really want it in the same position all the time. So what we are going to look at doing is moving this up and then having it spawn randomly on the top somewhere. So before we go any further, can you add in the onGameUpdate, and then can you add in the set enemy, change the variable there, rename it to enemy 1, create the sprite, draw it out for me, and then change it to kind enemy. Once you've done that, obviously resume the video. So pause the video now and I'll be with you in a moment. Okay, so the next task is going to be to set this enemy to be at the top, and we're going to basically set it to a random number. And the way we do that is if I go into the sprites option here at the top there, and you can see I've got set my sprite to position, and we're going to drag that in. Now don't forget we're dealing with the enemy, so you need to change this option here to enemy 1. And what you're going to notice is this enemy is going to go and fly into the top corner. Now you could hard code this if you wanted to, so it would be in the same position, but what we're going to do is we're going to use a random number generator, which just makes things a little bit easier for us. And I'm going to use my math library here, and we're going to look for pick random, there it is. And we're going to use this twice. Okay, so 1 is going to go there, and we're going to use it again in there. So if I just grab that back there, and what we can then do is we're now going to change the value. So you can see at this moment in time it's just making loads and loads and loads and loads. Let me just stop this for a moment. So pick random 0 and 10. So if you think of that, that's on the x-axis, so it's only going to produce anything from there, and the y-axis is there as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set this to 10, and I'm going to set this to say 150. Okay, so that will allow it then to be on the top, and then the y, I'm going to say 10, and then we're going to say 40 as well. Okay, now watch what happens. This is every half a second, right? Just watch what happens here when I start this. So every half a second a new enemy is spawning. Okay, so obviously this would be great for a really tough level, but not for an easy level. So you can change this. If we do it every 2 seconds as an example, and let's just recycle this, every 2 seconds is a little bit easier there, look, and you can see it's randomly coming up now with values there. Okay, now if you wanted the enemies to come down a little bit further, don't forget we're going to get these now to fly towards the bottom. So if you wanted to get these to move closer on the startup, you change these values here. Okay, but at the moment that's exactly what I want. So can you, using the sprites library here, add in this set my sprite and then change it to enemy 1. Using the math library then, put 2 random number generators in here and then change the values. I've used 10 and 150. You can use whatever values you want as long as you don't go higher than I think 150, because that's probably with the edge there as well. Okay, so pause the video now and add this part in, please. Welcome back. So the next thing that we are going to do is get these enemies to randomly just fall out of the sky and come towards us. Now you can see as this program's running, they just populate in and just appear in there, and before long this screen will be absolutely full. So what we need to do is make sure that we have these coming down on the y-axis so they come in towards us. We'll worry about what happens if one hits our little spaceship later, but let's just get these to move. So the way we do that is we're going to click on this here, the sprites, and we are going to look at this one here which says set my sprite X to actually nothing at the moment. So if I drag that in, and we're going to change this here, the variable, to enemy, and we're going to change this X here to velocity Y. Now let me just show you what's going to happen if I change this from 0, because 0 is obviously nothing, so that there now is just the static at the moment. So let's give it a value. I'm going to give it a value of 40 just to show you what's going to happen. So these now are going to constantly fall at a speed of 40, okay, which is fine, no problem. Let's say, for example, though, we were to put that up to 100, just as a really quick example. You can see now they're falling much quicker. Now there's a 2-second pause between each of these, so let's just give you a really quick example. If I put it as 500 milliseconds, so half a second, every half a second one of these is going to spawn and fly towards us at 100, which obviously then would make this game quite difficult. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is, obviously we're going to add this in, but we're going to add in a random number generator here. So again, I'm going to go into my math library and we're going to pick a random, and it can't be 0 because 0 just is static and it'll be there. So the minimum number I'd go for is 20, and we can go for, let's say, we'll go 50. So that's going to pick a velocity speed of 20 to 50. So some of them could be 20, some of them could be 25, some of them could be 50, and you'll see they'll fall at different speeds and so forth, which is absolutely fine. That's what I want for now. Now we need to make sure that when these go off the screen, we destroy them as well. Okay, so what we're also going to do is in the sprites option here, we're going to use this set my sprite again. So if I put that and change this, in fact, no, this is the wrong one, sorry. Let me just remove that. Let me go back into my sprites, and we're going to look for the auto destroy, which is this one here, sorry, it's this one. So click on that and set enemy. Instead of stay in screen, we're going to say auto destroy, and then click at that to on. So what that will do is when it leaves our screen, it'll destroy that instance of the enemy. Okay, so as soon as it goes off the screen, it's destroyed, and that's kind of what we want to achieve now at the moment. So this is what I needed to do. I needed to add in the select Y velocity and add in a random number, your choice, I don't mind what you put in, and then using the sprites menu again, change that to enemy 1, change the option there to auto destroy, and make sure it's turned on. If you can pause the video now and get that done, please. What we are going to do in this session is set up a collision detection so that if our enemy hits the player, then it's going to either cause damage or remove a life from it. Okay, this is a fairly easy concept to use, but there's a few steps in there, and there's a little bit of logic we need to think of. Now if I click on my sprites here and I scroll down, and I'll go to this one here, the overlap. So this is overlaps or collision detection as it's commonly known. So if I click, drag and drop that in, I'm just going to move this down a little bit here. So on sprite of kind player, overlaps at the sprite of kind player. Now we need to change this because it's basically saying if the player hits a player, which it's not going to because I've only got one player here. So if the player hits an enemy, then we need to do something here. Now I'm just going to show you very quickly. If I go into the info, and if you look here, look, I've got lives. So I'm going to change the life here, look, by -1. And let's play that. So if I play that, lovely. So what happens is this enemy has hit my player. Its life has gone from whatever it was set to. It's probably set to 1 at least, and then obviously we've taken 1 away, so it's ended the game. So the game's intelligent enough to know it's got intelligence built in, so that if the game life goes probably past 0, then it's going to be game over, like what it's got here. So in order to do that, we need to give it a little bit more of a chance. So we need to set the lives to 3 to start with. Now handily back at the top here, look, we've got an on start command. So back in this info, we are going to set the life to 3. And it doesn't actually matter which where this goes. I've accidentally put it in here, so let me just remove that because I want it to go in order. So I've got 3 lives. Now what you should see, I've got 3 hearts here, which I didn't have before. But watch what happens. It's still ending the game when only 1 object hits. Now what you've got to think of is every second this moves, this object moves, it's hitting this player. So even though it's just hit, if it hits for 3 seconds, it counts really as 3 lives. So what we need to do basically is this. We need to destroy this instance of the enemy. So as soon as this enemy hits my player, we need to get rid of it. Right? Otherwise this will happen. Now to do this handily, there is a destroy option. So if I click on the sprites and I'm going to look down here, so we've got destroy. Now this is where you need to be careful with this. We're not destroying the sprite, we're destroying the other sprite. Now if I click on my drop down here, you can see other sprite isn't actually here. So what we do is we drag and we drop that in there. And you can see it's outdid something else, so I'm just going to remove that here. Now let me just go through that again with you very, very quickly, because it is a little bit difficult to see sometimes. So I've added in a new code block here called destroy. It's in the sprites variable. I'm going to click on other sprite, drag that in and leave it go, and then I'm going to remove what's come out of it. Now watch what happens this time, right? Bear in mind I've got 3 lives. So that's 1 life gone. That's my 2nd life gone. And that's the 3rd life gone. Now we can add little effects to this. So spray effect as an example. So if I hit that, you can see it's spraying, or we can change the effect to whatever you want, right? We can put it into confetti if you really wanted to. But basically you need to make sure you are destroying that instance of the destroying the instance of the enemy when it hits you, right? Otherwise it's gonna use all your lives very quickly. Now one last thing that we can do, I know this is quite a large thing, what we can do is we can make the camera almost shake. So if I click on scene, and I'm going to look for, there's an option called camera shake. If I scroll down a little bit, it is here somewhere, there we are. Oh, is it? Yeah, shake. So camera shake, if I drag that in here, so every time my enemy hits my player, it's going to appear to wobble. There we are, can you see that? So it's almost like shaking as if we've got a crash. Okay, so just to recap, because this is quite a large section that you are going to need to do. The first thing that you are going to need to do is add in this code block here, the on sprite of kind player. You're then going to change this option at the end here called enemy. You need to add in a change life block here, which is from the info category. You then will need to add in this here, this set life to 3. And then once you've done that, you'll need the destroy block, which is blue, so it's from the sprites option. You then need to drag in this other sprite in here, and whatever pops out, remove it. And then if you want to add an effect, click on the plus. And then if you want to add that little bit extra there with the camera shake, you can use the scene option there and just drag that in. So again, if you can pause the video now and add in this collision detection for me now, please. And probably one of the last things we are going to do is create our second enemy, and the second enemy is going to be a bit more lethal than the first. It's going to move a little bit quicker, but we're going to have less of them. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move this down here, because the blocks we're going to use are going to be very, very, very similar to this. So the game block is where we're going to use and get this first block from. Now at the moment this one is set every 2 seconds. Now I'm not going to have it as fast as every 2 seconds, so I'm just going to set this to every 5 seconds, and we are going to add in the enemy. And the way we do that is we're going to click on set enemies. So if I click on that one there, so I go to my sprites, get this set my sprite. We're going to change the name of it, and if you rename, and you're going to call it enemy 2. Now mine might give me a little error because I just got enemy. Oh, there we are. It's done that. Anyway, it's happy. So set enemy 2 to sprite. So we're going to draw the sprite. Now, as I said to you before, you should have hopefully drawn the sprite out or planned it earlier. One thing that I probably didn't mention to you, if you look in the bottom corner here, right, it's just disappeared now because it's gone off. If you're ever looking for the center dot, it's going to be 8, 8. So that there is the dead center of this, if you are wondering how to get something into the center. So I'm just going to draw something really quickly. What I'm drawing, I've got no idea. It looks awful, doesn't matter. It's just to show you guys what it is we can do. Okie dokie, so this one is Hopefully your drawing skills are better than mine. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with this at the moment. There we are, that's done. When you are happy and you've drawn your second enemy, click on the done option, and that will obviously set there. Now we are going to use the same sort of options as we've used before here. Now you can duplicate these, but I don't want you to at the moment. We may as well add these in because you're not used to everything that's in here. So the set enemy position is going to be from the sprites. So you can kind of see here where we go in, set, and then we're going to change this to enemy 2, and then you've got their position 0, 0. So we're going to use random number generators, which are in the math library. So if I drag these both in, notice how I am putting them in now, right? I don't know if you just saw that as well. As I'm putting them in, they will hover in there. Okay, so we need to change that to pretty much the same sort of values. So if I do 10 to 150, and this one I'm not going to have as close down, and the reason for it is this one I'm going to basically have running much quicker. So I'm going to pick a random there from 10 to 20, and if we just restart this game for a second, you can see there, look, that's added a random one in there, which is great, and it'll add one in every sort of 5 seconds, which is fantastic. Now what we need to do is have this velocity going down. So again, we're going to go back into the sprites. We're going to look then down here. So if I click on this one here, set, again, we got to change this variable here to enemy 2, and then we're going to set the velocity y, and then we are going to set this, I'm going to be quite mean, and put 100 in, right? So it's really going to go quick. And then don't forget, now we need the auto destroy on as well, so that when it goes off the screen, it's going to destroy. So if I just scroll down here, find my auto destroy, I don't know where it's gone, hang on, I think I've gone past it, there it is. So set my sprite, and then set that to auto destroy, set that on, and hopefully every 2 seconds, oh hang on, I forgot to change that, look, now I don't know if you did see that, when I tried to play this, a little error popped up there, program error, sim error. The program errors are a little bit difficult to understand, but if you do get an error like that, just look in your code and you might see one of these little exclamation marks. This is telling you what's wrong. Okay, so I forgot to change mine to enemy 2, and hopefully now, there we are, bam, it'll work. Okay, so if I do that, there we are, so it is working quite well there. Now you will need to change one other thing as well. You'll need to tell it to be an enemy. Obviously I forgot to do that now, otherwise it's not going to have the collision detection working. So let's see if we can just prove that now. Bam, lovely. Okay, so that works there as well. So that's set to an enemy, that's set to an enemy, so when these hit, it will work. So if we look back at what we've done so far in this game here, let me just move these code blocks. We've got 2 enemies in and working. We've got collision detection. We've used some camera shake functions as well. We've set our player to move. We've also drawn a few players, and we've created our enemies as well, which will come in and update every few seconds. Now you can change these if you want to make the game a little bit more difficult, that's fine. In the next lesson we are going to advance this a little bit further. We're going to look at getting collectibles. We'll look then at a few more effects that we can add in to improve the overall appearance of the game and make it looking really good. Now hopefully you've done this within the Teams environment, so it should save for you. If you are in any doubt, if you click on the little save button on the bottom, not that one, the download button, if you are doing this in the browser, because you'll need to download it and save it somewhere. Okay. Now, if you're doing this within Teams, you will not need to download it at all. So that is it. Can you please make sure that you have added in the extra little bits that I've added in here, and make sure you rename the variables, and make sure you set it to a type of enemy, and make sure you set the velocity to something a lot quicker. Okay, best of luck.